5 3 9 7 1 5.
Hello and welcome to Bigfoot for Breakfast, home of the mysterious and the macabre, where we sit in the studio every week challenging conventional thought. We are your hosts, Sarah Jones
and Samantha Carter.
We are super excited to be back with you guys again this week, talking about some more weird stuff. But before we get started, we have to tell you, obviously, not to forget to please push the subscribe button on whichever podcast platform you're listening from. And if you would kindly take a few minutes to leave us a rating and a review, it would be much appreciated. Those reviews go a very long way to help out our little show here, and we're thankful for each and every one of them, some more than others.
If you have a show suggestion or just want to say hello, there are various ways to contact us. You can email us at bigfootforbreakfast@outlook.com, leave us a Facebook message, or you can call and leave us a voicemail at 641-812-2635, and we will play it on the air next week. Also, you can send us messages on Instagram.
Oh yeah, I forget about IG.
We got a really good Instagram message. Actually, last night I was talking to Barry, who had some really good input for us on the format of our show and stuff. So that was great. We're always glad to hear from people who listen, and we're happy to take any suggestions that you might have for us.
Seriously, it really makes a big difference and it makes us feel good. You know, we get a lot of people that are telling us, we really like the show, but you know, you could do this. We could see this different from you. But they always seem to be really polite and seem to be fans. And we truly do appreciate any suggestions you guys give.
Yep, absolutely. So shout out, Barry. Thanks for listening. We're really glad to hear from you, and stay in touch.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. So we're back in the studio. We've been a little off schedule lately, and we're sorry about that, but things have been kind of crazy with this whole quarantine thing.
We have all these kids and they're always here.
They're always here now, which, which is great, really.
But it's loud, and sometimes it's hard for us to get in the studio and get our stuff handled.
Yeah, it's just hard to find some quiet time in this house. And all the kids are usually here, like on the nights we decide to do our stuff. So Sam, have you had any cool quarantine activities besides work?
No, not really. We've been doing some painting, play some virtual reality on the PS4. That's always fun.
Yeah, you're into the video game stuff.
Apparently I'm into the video game stuff enough that I have gamer's thumb on both of my hands.
You do?
Oh my gosh, it's horrible.
I didn't know that was a thing.
It is a thing. I can't remember what the syndrome's called. It's got a weird name, but unpleasant.
Is it like carpal tunnel?
Yeah, it's similar. I think it's different tendons involved.
You get carpal tunnel from typing, right?
Yeah.
Typing too much?
Repetitive motion in your hands.
Oh, okay.
Just repetitive motion.
Crazy.
Also, I'm a really hard typer, so I suppose that has something to do with it. And maybe it's because I hit the space bar so hard with my thumb.
Oh, I remember that about you from high school even. You still are like that? I remember Mom would yell at you because she was afraid you were going to destroy the keyboard.
I'm very passionate about it, I guess. I don't know.
You're really getting into that message or whatever it is. Story you're writing.
It's hard enough to have it on one hand, and I have it on both.
Well, hopefully the weather will turn a little warmer and kill off this virus that we got going on. I've been getting a lot of gardening done. Flower gardens, they're getting beautiful.
I don't even have gardens yet.
We have several, but admittedly they're inherited from when we bought the house, so I've just felt obligated to keep them up. Well, not obligated, I want to, but it's hard. They're huge, and it's a situation. But I think this year I'll get it whipped just because I can't leave, so I need some mindless crap to do. So I listen to podcasts and garden stuff.
Yep, this will be like my first solid. I was in our house last summer, but there was a lot of, renovations and work and settling in and stuff going on. And I didn't really have any plans for what I wanted to do. So this year I think I'll try to get some of that stuff done.
Yeah, get some gardening done. It's kind of fulfilling, to be honest. You get it all done, and when it looks really pretty, you feel really proud of yourself. I do, anyway. I love it. I kind of do love it.
I struggle with being outside.
I love being outside.
Well, I get so itchy.
It is itchy out there. I think my flower garden has a mission to kill me every year, and I mean that.
Well, you have such sensitive skin. I mean, you're so sensitive.
There's something out there, though, and I'm not 100% sure on what it is, like I've got now.
You're terribly poisoned most of the time.
It's on my face. Do you see it?
It's everywhere all the time.
So, but that last year, it was like 100 times worse. Remember I had the blisters and it wasn't poison ivy. We came to the conclusion that it was stinging nettle. I've never had poison ivy, but if it's anything like stinging nettle, it was the worst thing.
Ooh, I've had poison ivy one time and it was horrific.
I was kind of gun shy this year about going back in there, but I did it super early and I pulled up a bunch of questionable vines and plants before they had a chance to attack. So
clearly not.
Well, better than last year.
Yeah.
This is nothing compared to what last year was, so whatever. Hopefully things will go back to normal for people. I've honestly been kind of enjoying the everybody being at home family time that we've been having.
Yeah.
I really have been. I've kind of loved it.
I feel absolutely spoiled because, I only work 3 nights a week, so I have so much free time and then kids at home. Love it.
I do love it. I hate to be that way, but I guess you got to look at the bright side of things. I know there are a lot of people out of work and going through some hard times right now, so hopefully things will go back to normal for them and they won't have to worry.
I'm definitely thankful for being considered essential.
Yeah, kind of.
And sometimes. Although I wasn't very happy because I was sick and I did have to I was quarantined for 12 days and missed out on 3 days of work. And if any of you know how differentials and incentives work, it's not very fun to not have them when you're used to having them.
No, it's not. We've been kind of thankful, though, that our counties so far haven't been hit as hard as a lot of others. So hopefully we're really hoping to skirt the radar on this one and just kind of...
It's creeping closer because we've got the surrounding counties. We've got 2 more touching counties that have confirmed cases now. So it's getting kind of scary.
It's probably imminent, but such little hospitals and we really would like to keep everybody cool.
My advice was just don't test people. If you don't know, it's fine.
Yeah.
Cannot confirm.
Yeah, exactly. So lately, let's get on with this whole show we're doing. Lately, we've been covering kind of a variety of things. From missing people to UFOs, government conspiracies, and then there was last week's clown situation, which I wasn't fond of.
I think we did have quite a few people that were quite fond of it.
Well, that's good. At least there's somebody.
And you know what's really weird is that since we did that episode, I'm on this Facebook group that is quarantine karaoke. And did you see I posted on our Facebook page, there was a guy on there that was doing a karaoke set and he was a creepy clown and he was doing covers of these really awesome songs. Really cool. I wish I could remember his name so we could shout him out, but it's on our Facebook page, so you should go check him out. It was really cool, but I thought it was coincidental that we did that episode and then the next day there was that. And then last night I was surfing through on my Amazon Video and I found a movie that I hadn't seen called Clownado.
Not Clownado. Is that what you said?
Yes, Clownado.
So it's like Sharknado with clowns?
With clowns.
That's awful.
Yes.
Why?
Send in the clowns.
Why would that ever happen?
I was really disappointed. I was like, I really wish that I had seen this movie before I did that episode.
Yeah, then we could talk about it then.
Stand by for the later review because I didn't get to finish it. We also want to take a few minutes to let you in on some recommendations that we have for some other shows. We know a few that may pique your interest. The Question Everything guys, Semper Fi Rob, Sean, and the Mick host a show where they pick a different topic every week that usually seems to coincide with issues that we seem to be facing at the time as American people, and they discuss it. They usually do a Facebook Live every Saturday, and then they'll post the edited version to the podcast platforms a few days later. They also take call-ins from guests who have anything to say regarding the topic that week. So if you can relate in some way or have an opinion, get on their Facebook Live and give them a call and chat them up for a while.
MWP is another show that you guys should check out. Chach and Josh are funny and their conversations flow really well. They talk a lot about movies, wrestling, politics, whatever else comes up through the episode with a lot of jokes and a lot of great personality. So check them out. You won't regret it.
The Kensington Corner with Tom and Jeff is another great show. They tackle the problems of the world one thing at a time, but they focus a lot on health and overall well-being, both mentally and physically, from a man's standpoint. And we found their show to be really interesting because they aren't afraid to really get into the everyday struggles that guys face, especially with mental health and stress. It's a really honest show, and one of them is a veteran, so they promote various causes associated with the mental health of veterans as well, which we think is incredible because it's a very important topic and our nation's veterans don't get the love and support that they deserve. Any conversation that can be had about how to improve that is fantastic.
So anyway, This week we're taking a nosedive right back into the paranormal. So I came across this story a few months ago, and it's really crossed my mind several times since then. There are a lot of stories out there when it comes to ghosts and demons, obviously. Some of the stories seem pretty standard. Then there are several that I read that seem so sensationalized that I'm not sure that I believe them, or
I have a really hard time using the word standard when you're talking about demon possession. Oh, it's just your average everyday possession. No big deal.
well, sometimes the stories get kind of redundant.
Yeah.
They're also
They
similar.
are similar.
But then you run into this one, and it kind of stood out to me, and it really makes you think about what could be out there beyond the veil and how sometimes whatever it is seems to kind of slip through, sometimes for a fleeting moment, and someone might catch it just quick enough to make them wonder, even if they saw anything at all. Other times it'll reach through and just take a hold of a person. It can send their life spiraling into the world of confusion and loneliness that seems to accompany a huge life event that you can't even seem to explain to your closest friends and family. But this strange story isn't even like that. These events that plagued one man were witnessed by a lot of people. They were witnessed by many, and actually pretty credible people, so I found that one more enticing, I guess. So a lot of times, yeah, stories sound really cool, but no one else saw it, and you can't prove it. And this was something lots of people saw. It was crazy.
Yeah, it's great to have that corroboration.
For sure.
It's very validating, especially for the person who's experiencing it firsthand.
Now, we have some criticism of this case, which, that's a thing. So
there's always gonna be.
Yeah, and he has an explanation for even that, because my kind of thinking when I was reading his criticism was, well, how do you explain everybody corroborating it? He even shoots that down. So we'll get to him too. Okay, Sam.
Yeah, it's one thing to have your life completely thrown into chaos by something natural or normal, something that other people can see and relate to, something that you can talk about. It's quite another to be completely unable to explain the chaos and unable to fight back, mostly because you don't even know what you're fighting. It's strong and it's terrifying, following you wherever you go. People you love, people who love you and support you can see it too, and they're powerless to fight it too. They don't really know how to help you or how to save you.
Kind of like Sam's addiction to cats.
I don't need saved.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, I do need saved. I need saved.
Your cat is horribly mean.
Oh my God. Well, I have a really mean demon cat, and then I have one that it's smothering.
Really, they're really hot and cold. You just don't know what you're going to get from those guys.
You're going to get snuggled, and then you're going to get bit.
When
and
she's
then they're
done.
sorry, and then they snuggle you again.
They're sorry. So this week we're going to bring you a story from Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, February 1983. A funeral was taking place in town, and as 21-year-old Don Decker stood with sobbing family and looked on as the casket was lowered down into the ground, he felt a strange sense of relief. He wasn't sad that this man was gone, and for Don, not only was his grandfather, 63-year-old James Kinshaw, being laid to rest, but hopefully feelings of resentment and anger were being laid to rest as well. His grandfather was an incredibly negative person in his life. It wasn't strange to him necessarily that he was relieved, but to others in his family who would not have understood.
Keep this in mind because as the funeral went on and Don heard family member after family member recount their stories of love for this man who he considered to be nothing more than a monster, he began to experience not only feelings of relief, but now anger. It built up inside of him the entire time as everyone stood around singing his praises until the man who was his grandfather was lowered firmly into the ground. And then he still felt it.
Don Decker's grandfather was abusive, and he hated him. He physically tormented Don from an early age, but Don took this opportunity to gather with family, not because he was sad or that he wanted to be there, but because that was what seemed appropriate. His attendance felt obligatory. He hadn't seen his family for some time because, as life sometimes goes, Don had made some mistakes early on and he was serving prison time at the Monroe County Correctional Facility for a charge of receiving stolen property. He got to leave jail for a few days to return home since his grandfather had passed. He got back to Stroudsburg to find that his mother didn't want him to stay at her house. I'm not sure what the deal was with that, but from what I had read, it seems that she was mad at him for having gotten into trouble, and they weren't really on speaking terms.
Many moons ago, this situation that we will be discussing today was featured on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack. Don Decker was personally interviewed and was stating that he felt free after his grandfather's death. He seemed to feel that he had held those feelings towards his grandfather and his abuse inside for so long that he thought that maybe this would allow him to let them go and that things would take a turn for the better in his life. It seems like this feeling of freedom and relief was really short-lived, though, and was replaced by a whole different type of anger pretty quickly.
From the sounds of it, his family had all but disowned him for his stint in prison. Even though, like we said, the charge was receiving stolen goods. So it probably wasn't Don Decker's proudest moment, but for sure, I wouldn't think it'd be anything to disown your family member over. Not to be disrespectful, but just from the information we have seen so far, it kind of speaks volumes for the family dynamic here.
There were a lot of feelings floating around for Don. The surely ever-present feelings of anger, betrayal, and hatred for a grandfather who was supposed to love, protect, and care for him. The conflicting feelings of the relief that he experienced with his death. It was probably confusing in a way, since the death of a close family member shouldn't make a person feel any type of happiness. And on top of that, he was present at the funeral of this man with all of these feelings already in attendance, feeling obligated to be mourning the way that everyone else was. His family was there too, and they were angry at him and had cast him out due to his own mistakes, but then were genuinely distraught over the death of this terrible man and singing his praises throughout the day. I would imagine that that is a very lonely and isolating feeling. Obviously, Don didn't go home with his family. Don stayed with a few friends instead. Their names were Bob and Jeannie Kiefer on Ann Street, and the three of them left the funeral quickly once it had wrapped up, and Don had his fill of pretending to be sad out of respect for his family. Don hadn't been a bad guy. He'd gotten himself into a bad place and wanted to get his prison sentence over with and move on with his life, get straightened out and on a good path. Lots of people fall on hard times and make mistakes. His friend, Bob Kiefer, wanted to help him. He was a family friend and had known Don for a long time.
Obviously, Unsolved Mysteries was one of my fave shows. And I can't say that was while we were growing up, because while we were growing up, we only had a TV antenna. So we had about, 5 channels, Sam, growing up? So while the other kids were watching Unsolved Mysteries and MTV on their fancy-ass Dish Network,
I'm pretty sure most kids weren't watching Unsolved Mysteries.
Maybe not.
I think we kind of stood apart in that.
Seemed pretty popular. Who knows? We were outside scooping pig shit and throwing hay because our parents thought we should learn how to work hard or something. It's kind of weird because I only, in the last few years, ever saw Unsolved Mysteries, even for the first time. Yeah, just maybe the last 5 years. And when I discovered that this was available to me, I binged on it for an unspeakable amount of time and fed my teenage angst over not getting to understand the quandaries of the world through the fabulous storytelling of Robert Stack. But that's a whole other situation for therapy. This episode had come up on that show, and there are only about 15 minutes worth of information in each little segment. So I knew that there was probably a lot more to the story, and I was right. So this is the extended version, in which we grabbed information from many different sources to give you a more rounded out version of the events and the details. The only place that I could find that Don Decker and other witnesses were actually interviewed, though, was on Unsolved Mysteries. So if we're going to be directly quoting in this episode, it will have come from there.
Story time.
Story time.
The story starts with the night of the funeral. They had gone home, and it seems that they were getting ready to eat dinner, and Don was washing his hands in the upstairs bathroom of the Kiefer home. A feeling came over him very suddenly that he would describe simply as weird.
Weird.
I always have to throw that in there. Weird.
I do. Weird.
He turned to use the towel to dry his hands when suddenly he felt like all of the air was being sucked right out of the little bathroom and he was cold. The oddest feeling. He began to feel really disoriented, like he was in a dream or some kind of trance. So he laid down on the cold tile floor of the bathroom. He was trying to refocus his mind and get it together. As he was looking around the room, his eyes met the only window, and very clearly through it, on the other side, staring back at him, was the worn-out face of a very old man wearing a crown on his head. And it looked like he was smiling, laughing even. Then all at once, It stopped.
Obviously.
How is it obvious?
Obvi.
Obs.
Obs.
Totes.
Dawn was pretty shaken up about this. As he should be.
Yeah. It's just your standard everyday haunting, you know.
Going back to the standard. That part is somewhat standard. But it freaked him out pretty bad. This isn't something a person comes across every day. He was on leave from prison and he was staying in an unfamiliar home as a guest, so he didn't want to just run downstairs and freak them out too. It seemed rude. I don't know. He decided that he wasn't in the best position to talk about it, and he just kept his mouth shut when he walked downstairs for dinner. But as he walked downstairs for dinner, Bob noticed something weird about Dawn. Weird. He had deep scratches on his forearm, and they looked like claw marks, and it was bleeding. Dawn didn't notice this previously, probably because he was so shaken up and adrenaline filled. You know how that goes. He could only insist to Bob that he had not done it to himself. When Bob naturally implored further as to why he was all scratched up, Dawn, still shaken up, simply told him, "There's something upstairs."
Someone's at the door. Do you remember that
Yeah,
that show?
I forgot
American
about
Gothic.
that.
I don't know why that just clicked because I was like, what, 11 when I watched that show?
I remember it being a really good show.
It was.
We're gonna have
Anybody else remember that show?
American Gothic.
Someone's at the door.
It was that same kid that played in Sling Blade.
So they all decided to just forget about this and kind of just shrugged it off and sat down to a nice dinner together. How do you forget it? I don't know. Anyway,
Let's just sweep her under the rug.
Small talk at the dinner table had led them to forget the incident and reminisce for a time. So after dinner was all over and things were cleaned up, they all retired to the living room and were relaxing and watching television when a cold burst of air suddenly rushed through the living room. Just your standard everyday haunting. So it felt really similar to the cold vacuum of air movement that he had experienced in the upstairs bathroom. Pretty soon after this, Jeannie suddenly sat upright on the couch, telling Dawn that there was a big problem,
I'd say.
indicating towards the wall there in the living room. There was water running down the wall, which was super weird because there were no pipes at all located in that part of the house. There was no source for the water to be coming from, it seemed, and Bob remembered touching the water and felt that it was a little thicker, somewhat sticky, and not completely like water.
Every time he describes it, I think of like plasma from the Ghostbusters. It's plasma.
Is it plasma? No, it's ectoplasm.
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 That's what it is. It's been a long time.
Ectoplasm.
You must need to rewatch some Ghostbusters.
Right.
It's been a while.
Clearly not me.
No, you knew. You've been watching Ghostbusters.
Well, mostly because I really wanted my license plates to be Ecto 2, but apparently somebody already had that.
Yeah.
Jerks.
Bastards. Anyway, after a few minutes of trying to figure out where the water was coming from and what to do about it, they noticed that now it had begun to drip from the ceiling as well.
Don't cross the streams.
The whole ceiling, across the entire room. Slow drips constantly fell from everywhere. It was a huge mess and a huge mystery. Not wanting the house to get damaged, especially since they were renting it, Bob called their landlord, telling him that he needed to come over to the house right now. If the landlord came by, he would at least understand that the damage to the house wasn't anything that they did. Their landlord, Ron, showed up with his wife in tow, and they were just as perplexed as everyone else.
So it was a real thing, not something that they were just seeing. It was like a real...
What do you mean?
The liquid. It was real.
Not like just a
Not
hallucination?
Yeah.
No.
I was wondering whether that's a real thing or not. Y'all need to call Bill Murray, like right now.
Right? That he'd be on my speed dial for that. So, no, it was for real. There was actual liquid coming from everywhere in this room. At this point, though, it's just running down the wall. Now it's across the entire ceiling. So they're getting pretty concerned because it's causing problems with their house. Or it will if they let it go on for too long. Bob and Ron went upstairs to where there were pipes and plumbing in the house to see if anything had burst, or to at least see if they could figure out how this was happening. A frightened Dawn...
I was trying to figure out what I would do in that situation.
Your first thought with water is plumbing, obviously. If there's nothing with plumbing and there's no pipes there, you're just clueless.
So Bob and Ron checked everything out, and when they could find absolutely nothing wrong with the plumbing, they came back downstairs. Now, remember, had there been anything wrong with the plumbing, it still would have been weird for water to present itself on the opposite side of the house from where the plumbing was located. It's science. Also, even if there's a plumbing issue in that part of the house, water doesn't usually run up the walls and float across the room.
Yeah, laws of physics and such.
While it did seem reasonable to check that first, I feel like it still would have been somewhat of a mystery.
Dun dun dun.
Weird. They were astonished to find that not only did water continue to run now down all of the walls in the living room and drip from the ceiling, but now the water seemed to be floating and bubbling up from the floor. See, that wouldn't surprise me in my house. Oh, the basement's flooding all the way to the ceiling. Fill it up.
Swimming pool house.
No.
Fun.
Nope.
Yes.
Don remained on the couch where they had left him sitting, but at this point he seemed to be totally unresponsive. He sat in an upright position, eyes open and fixed forward, but would not move, flinch, or answer them when they tried to speak to him. He just sat there, like he was under some kind of hypnosis. Not only would he not respond to them, but he was also starting to look pale and sickly. They didn't really know what else to do. Even though it didn't really seem appropriate, they didn't know where to turn for a problem like this, so they called the popo.
Kind of like I call the popo for bats.
Right?
Well, they're gross.
The popo or the bats?
The bats. So the police arrived. I would have liked to heard the call go over the pager and what they thought they would expect to find upon entering the home. Officers, please respond emergent to water floating in residence. I repeat, water floating in residence. That sounds more like Walmart than a dispatcher.
We have a ectoplasm leak in aisle 5.
John Bojan, along with his partner Richard Wolbert, were the responding officers, and John actually knew Bob and Jeannie. The police walked into the residence and were drenched within a few minutes of being there. Robert later made a comment in an interview that the water was floating around the room and kept hitting him in his glasses. Apparently, the police were immediately puzzled as soon as they went in and they saw the situation. They all stood outside of the room and just kind of watched the water fall all over the place in awe or horror.
You need to just call the fire department to burn it down.
Just let it go. It was unexplainable. While they stood and debated, all of them saw one giant gathering of water seem to form in midair and in the middle of the room. It hovered there for a minute or two before quickly darting off through the air and into the kitchen.
Police officer John Bojan stated, "I had a chill go up my spine. It will make the hair stand up on your neck. This is a situation where things were happening that I never ever thought could be possible, and there was no way of explaining what was going on."
At that point, the cops were out.
I'm out.
I'm done. Not knowing what else to do, I mean, really, what do they do?
What do you do?
Or how to handle the situation, they ended up calling their chief, Gary Roberts, in the middle of the night and asked that he come down to the house and check it out for himself. Of course, he didn't believe a word of it, and he was convinced that his officers were overreacting, even if it was true. Something like that was beyond their control or expertise anyway. He told them to leave the house and not worry about filing a report.
Call the priest.
Right. Dawn and the Kiefers were left to their own devices to figure this out on their own. The police on the scene thought that it might be a good idea to move Don Decker to the pizza place across the street to see if the rain would stop. Keep in mind, too, that Don Decker is he's just sitting there staring off into space, it seems like, and not really responding. He's awake and breathing.
Catatonic.
He's catatonic, yes.
So they did just that. The Kiefers carried him over to the pizza place, putting him down in a booth there. Ron Van Wy, the landlord, stayed behind to continue trying to sort out the problem and maybe figure out where all of this water was coming from, as any good landlord should. Meanwhile, in the pizza place, almost immediately upon Don Decker's arrival, water began to form all over the room. Soon it had accumulated enough that the same thing was happening there. Water running up the walls, across the ceiling, and seeming to float through the air. Don remained in his trance-like state. The owner of the pizza restaurant, Pam Scorfano, immediately got the impression that something evil had taken over this man, ya think? It sounded like she was really freaked out, as well she should be. And she felt that this was an ominous sign that this was really something pure evil. She was a Catholic woman and kept a crucifix in the cash register there. She ran over to the register and grabbed the crucifix out and then carried it over to Don, placing it over his chest.
I wondered the whole time I was writing this why they immediately went to it being something evil. Why is it not something cool? I think I would be more like entranced by it and enamored by it. I don't think I would have been scared at this point.
What was that movie, like The Core, where they go underwater and then they were floating massive stuff and it was like mimicking the guy? I'm like, why wouldn't you?
That's not The Core.
No.
No. Is that The Abyss?
The Abyss.
That's a good movie.
It was a hole.
That was a good movie. Scary, though. Immediately, when she placed the cross on his chest, Dawn screamed out, seeming to be in a great deal of pain.
I think that kind of confirms the evil theory.
Yeah. So up until now, I felt like it was neat, I guess.
Leave it to the Catholic to test the theory and prove it true.
Dang it. Everyone could see the deep burn mark that it had left in the shape of a cross right there on his chest. What in the world had they gotten into? Pam, along with everyone else, was astonished and scared. Later in an interview, she would say, there was nobody who could have played a joke like that. This was real. Donnie was doing it himself. He was doing it without realizing he was doing it.
Obviously, Don couldn't stay in the pizza restaurant.
Obvi.
He had to go home. The keepers took him right back to the house. For the record, the water stopped at the pizza restaurant upon his departure.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea because I feel like a state inspector would not appreciate this accumulation of moisture.
The only thing worse than rats in your pizza parlor are wet rats in your pizza parlor.
Yuck.
Anyway, he was still catatonic. Keepers decided to put him in a chair in the kitchen, and as they sat him down, they began to try harder to get him to snap out of it. I feel like burning him with a cross probably should have done it.
Well, it did for a minute, like he reacted, but still nothing responsive.
They asked him question after question, becoming angry. Don still didn't move. He didn't flinch. His eyes didn't move when they spoke, and he certainly didn't answer. The water was back again, in the kitchen, climbing the walls, bubbling up from the floor, and floating across the room as if they were in space. It would be, you'd feel like an astronaut.
That's what I'm saying. I'd be like, cool. I think
Wondrous.
Wondrous. That's right.
Witnesses would later describe it as surreal.
Imagine this like they're in the Matrix, bending backwards and dodging the water with their sunglasses in slow motion. I doubt that this is what it was, but it's kind of fun to think of it like that. Matrix water. Correct?
Is it weird that my favorite part of the Matrix was when it glitched and there was 2 cats?
Is it super weird that I have never seen a Matrix movie ever? Not any of them.
Oh, I've seen all of them.
I've
a
only
lot
seen
of times.
I've only seen bits and pieces enough to make me feel like this is the Matrix water when they're kind of like slow-moing around all the time. Ninja stuff.
Keanu. Whoa.
Whoa.
You said we went too far.
We went too far. I love Keanu. Keanu is
Whoa.
awesome. But I'm more of like a Point Break Keanu.
How did I know you were going to say that,
Since
Johnny
I have
Utah?
a dog named Johnny Utah. I love it. I have a basset hound named Johnny Utah.
If I was going to pick a dog to compare to Keanu, it wouldn't be Johnny Utah.
Well, that was kind of the point, because he was such a not badass looking dog, and we thought it'd be funny to like, Johnny Utah.
You should have named him Hans Gruber.
Well, we'll be getting another dog eventually. Hans Gruber may be the thing.
So, Don didn't seem amused by this whole situation. He said that at this point, he knew it was following him, the rain, or whatever was causing the rain. It started raining in the house, and that had never happened before he came to visit. He left the house, and the rain stopped. He sat down at the pizzeria. Rain again. He left the pizzeria. No rain. Now, here he is again in the keeper's house. How was this happening? What is happening? What is happening? Why is it raining inside?
As the Van Wyes were becoming more and more angry at the damage being done to their house and the lack of answers as to why, the pots and pans began to move, chatter, like there was an earthquake, but nothing else was moving.
Started asking myself, and why? Why?
The landlord and his wife, Ron and Romaine Van Wy, were starting to get really mad. They started shouting at the Kiefers, accusing them of pulling some sort of prank and destroying their property. The shouting back and forth got louder. The rattling of the pots and pans also got louder and louder. And then suddenly, according to witnesses, Don, still stone-faced, lifted straight up into the air. He hung there for a few minutes and then flew forcefully across the room, back and forth, hitting several times against a wall before whatever force had done this finally released him. As he fell to the ground, he seemed to wake up and become alert again. There were more scratches and marks on his arms, both arms now. So we're taking a turn for the evil. It's no longer wondrous.
I'd say at this point, bring back the water.
Right? Well, the water's still there.
I was fine with just the water.
The water's still happening.
Give me the slime water. Quit throwing me into walls.
Slime matrix
We don't
water.
throw our friends. It was undeniable. Whether they wanted to believe in that sort of thing or not, Don seemed to have been attacked by something paranormal. There was no way that he could be doing this himself. It was completely impossible. So they called the police back to the house and wrapped the claw marks on Don's arms. While Ron, the landlord, was attending to an injured Don, Jeannie Kiefer got out a Bible and started to read aloud. At that moment, the water seemed to be only around her and nowhere else.
I feel like they're getting on the right track, though, on how to solve this problem.
I'm pretty sure I wouldn't want to be the one drawing slime water to me.
Don had spoken about being lifted into the air and thrown across the room. Regarding that, he says, quote, "It wasn't like someone had taken their hand and pushed me. It was like a feeling all over your body at once. I'm a big guy, and I've always been assertive, but that made me feel like a newborn."
We also don't throw our newborns.
For the record.
So Romaine Van Wy, who's the landlord's wife, or I guess also the landlady.
Merman.
Oh my gosh.
Story
merman.
time.
Story time. We were watching this movie called Velasa... What did I say it was?
I don't even know.
Oh, Velocipaster. And it's hilarious and you have to watch it. If you haven't seen Velocipaster, it's so worth it. And don't shut it off halfway through. You have to finish it.
Suffer.
Anyway, yeah, you will suffer. But no, it's amazing. So
It's that good kind of suffering.
and there's a character in the movie. I don't remember his first name. His last name was like Billy Mermaid or something like that. I can't remember what the first name was, but his last name was Mermaid. He's a pimp. So you want to know why they call me Mermaid? Because you're swimming in bitches? That's right. Okay. Dude who wrote this movie, you are epic.
You're swimming in bitches?
Swimming in bitches. So my name's Merman or Mermaid.
That's awesome, a little.
Johnny Mermaid? Something like that.
Gator don't play no shit.
Gator don't play no shit. Ass up, inflamed.
What? Ass up, inflamed?
Yes, Gator's wife was a doctor and he met her in the ER because he had poison ivy on his ass.
I couldn't remember that.
It's a love story for the ages.
Did you just say America?
Little LRB. Little River Band.
All right, moving on. What did Romaine say about the incident, Samantha?
Good. It's good. What movie is that from?
Bruce Almighty.
Oh, yeah.
We watch way too many movies, if you haven't noticed.
I believe there was an evil spirit, or a demon that possessed his body and caused this.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal, providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.
The whole time that the Kiefers had been with Don in the pizza place and then back in the kitchen, officers Bojan and Wolbert, the ones who had responded previously, had been back at the police station still trying to convince their chief, Gary Roberts, of what they had seen. He didn't believe a word of it, but when the officers got called back to the house, Gary Roberts decided to tag along and see what the fuss was all about.
These are the kind of situations where you want the body cams.
Yeah, for real. Well, I think you want the body cams all the time.
And cell phone cameras.
Heck yes. The chief was kind of a no-nonsense guy. Straight-faced, straightforward, and very skeptical of the magical matrix water that his officers had been going on about. But Chief Gary Roberts also seems to have seen what everyone else did in this situation. He walked into the residence and the water was still everywhere and behaving in the same way that it was before. He remained in staunch denial of anything supernatural happening here. It was a water leak, he said. He told Bojan and Wolbert to quit investigating and leave it alone. The two officers were in total disbelief. Obviously, this was weird, and the fact that he told them not to file a report and to leave it alone made him feel like he was just covering it up and didn't want to get involved.
Why though?
I think he was just one of those people. He doesn't believe in this stuff at all. So when he saw it, he was just like, it's just a water leak.
It's a floating water leak. No big deal.
Ignore it. Didn't happen.
Officer Bojan would later state that he got the impression that the chief felt like he was put on the spot, like something was expected of him in this situation and he didn't have the answers. There was no way to explain what happened, and he was put in a position where maybe he felt a little uncomfortable. He flat out denied that it ever happened and tried to convince me that it didn't happen, but he wasn't going to do that. I saw it, and that's all there is to it. And that's a direct quote from Officer Bojan.
The next day, a couple of more officers, along with officers from the previous night, visited them even though the keepers had told them that it probably wasn't the best time. The two new officers in attendance were William Davies and John Rundle. The officers wanted a few more witnesses to the incident since their chief, Gary Roberts, was still not convinced that anything weird was going on. And he once again ordered the officers to just forget the whole thing.
Denial ain't just a river in Egypt, bud.
But how could they forget something like that or ignore it? When they first got there, things in the house seemed to have pretty much returned to normal. The water was not falling everywhere anyway. They decided to test the waters. Get it? Officer Davies had heard about the incident and the pizza place where Don Decker had been burned by the crucifix as it was laid upon his chest. He asked Don to hold a cross that he had brought with him. Don took hold of the cross and immediately started to say that it was hot, and he couldn't really hold on to it. Davies kind of laughed it off as though he didn't really believe him. Almost immediately, he was sure to have changed his mind, as Don was seen to have levitated once again into the air and was immediately thrown across the room and again into the wall. On top of that, when the strange event was over, more scratch marks were noted on Don's body, bleeding. You know, I don't mention this later, but when the skeptic is going through this whole case, he never does explain the scratch marks, and I feel like if there's, let's see, the Kiefers, the two officers from the other night, two more officers, 6 people standing there watching this whole thing happen, I feel like they would have seen him scratch himself. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe there's acid in the water.
I don't know. It's a deal. It's just a deal. It's a deal.
It's a deal. What episode did we keep saying that? Oh, it's a deal.
I don't know. It's back,
I couldn't stop saying it.
It's a deal again.
Lieutenant John Rundle, one of the officers who witnessed this incident in the Keeper's home, stated, "I have no answer for it whatsoever. He was thrown across the room like he got hit by an invisible bus." And there's your answer, folks. Invisible bus.
That's what it is.
I just draw a blank, even today.
The other officer who was president, I always say president instead of president. Lieutenant William Davies stated, "I had been a cop here for 4 years. Never saw anything like this ever. I mean, there's always an explanation when something happens. You have to investigate. You come up with something. This is why it happened. In this case, there's no explanation."
Welcome to our world.
Right? Pisses you off. I need closure.
Right?
There's none. Ever.
There's none. Now, this happened right in front of the Kiefers and 4 police officers. 6 eyewitnesses saying the same thing. And I reiterate, police officers. Mostly because I hold them to a higher standard. And I can't believe that 4 of them would just make up a story like this and stick to it.
I believe that.
I concur.
I don't think they would. I think at least one of them would be like, you guys are crazy. But none of them did. They all saw it and, you know, are going with it. In the meantime, after the event from the night before, landlord Ron Van Wy had been at home calling all over town to any priest who would listen trying to get them to perform an exorcism on Don Decker, or at least come out to the house and see for themselves what was going on. Unfortunately, one cannot just request an exorcism and have it done. One exorcism, please.
Which is crazy because, like we talked about in our exorcism episode, they're still training priests on doing this, and in large numbers.
Well, they are, but they're not doing exorcisms. Apparently, there's a whole process that you have to go through.
It's the last resort.
In order to get it approved by the Catholic Church. So you have to submit this. Mm-hmm. And there has to be so much evidence, and I don't know what evidence it is, but apparently there's a whole process to it. Like there's a protocol, which was a damn good thing.
It's dangerous.
Well, they're like killing folks.
Danger, Will Robinson.
A few days of weird happening is not going to do it, is our point. Then there are various meetings and approvals, etc.
This is beyond a few days of weird. This is floating slime water.
No, it isn't. It's literally just a few days of weird.
And scratches.
Because it's only over that weekend. Remember?
I know. Yeah, I'm not disputing the fact that it's a few days. I'm disputing that it's more than your standard haunting report.
But I think the point was he didn't really seem to be in immediate danger enough. I guess, I don't know. His head wasn't backwards yet.
Invisible body slam. There was no pea soup yet.
Not yet.
Was there ever pea soup?
Well, I'm not going to spoil the story, Sam. We got a story to tell.
Pea soup. Okay, Ron did, however, convince one person to at least come and check the stuff out. They weren't a priest, but a local evangelical preacher. They prayed heavily with Don, and it said that as they prayed together, Don seemed to go in and out of what looked like convulsions until he rolled into a fetal position on the floor. The preacher continued to pray over him, and over time, Don seemed to calm down and relax. Don seemed to feel a lot better after the prayer was finished, almost normal again. The rain didn't fall anymore in the Kiefer house on that last day or night during Don's visit.
Romaine Van Wy stated, his whole body seemed to quiet, completely down, and as you're standing there watching this, you could feel the house take on a whole different feeling.
By the time she was done praying, the rain had stopped. Don and Kiefer didn't experience this super weird, frightening phenomenon.
Don and the Kiefers.
I thought that's what I said.
You said Don and Kiefer, like Kiefer Sutherland.
Don and Kiefer. We're just hanging out with Mr. Sutherland. Mr. Kiefer. Don and the Kiefers didn't experience this super weird and frightening phenomenon for the rest of the weekend.
The weekend had passed, and as Don Decker was only on leave for prison, as luck would have it, it was time for him to return and finish out his sentence. Don sat in prison deliberating with himself what could have caused the rain to fall like that all around him, and what could have made him levitate and be thrown around so easily like a rag doll. He was pretty decent-sized guy, and this made him feel totally powerless. Of course, the entire time this was happening, he thought that it surely was his deceased grandfather haunting him from beyond the grave, maybe even possessing him. He had dealt with such turmoil throughout his life over this man, and now he was here to continue to torment him after he was gone. Then he thought a little further into it. What if his feelings of angst, hatred, and anger were so strong that it caused an outward reaction in the universe around him?
Totally a thing.
It's totally a thing. What if he could do it again? What if he could make it rain himself and control it? He began to practice, concentrating on what he wanted so hard. He wasn't really sure that anything would happen. He was pretty certain that nothing would happen. But he tried anyway. I guess he had seen such weird things around him this past weekend that he thought that anything was possible at this point.
And to Don's surprise, water seeping from the walls to the window.
We can always reference Fiddy.
Right?
Is that Fiddy?
Make it rain. No, it's not Fiddy.
Who is it?
I don't remember. Anyway, the Matrix water was back is the important part. A prison guard happened by the cell and saw the water everywhere. The guard got pretty annoyed about it and asked Don and his cellmate, what's up with the water? Why are you making it rain, bro? So Don flat out told him that he created the water from his mind, probably feeling pretty excited about it. Remember how the last episode totally dashed our Harry Potter dreams? Well, I think our dreams are back with this one.
Right?
Accio Agua. No, it's Aguamente.
I have no idea.
Aguamente.
I'm admittedly not that much of a Harry Potter fan.
That's wizard speak for making it rain.
Now, Harry Potter. Harry Potter's okay, but I can watch a Harry Potter movie, but I am definitely not obsessed. I don't care to go to Florida and be on the Hogwarts train and drink the butterbeer. Is it butterbeer? Is that what it's called?
I lived my dream that summer,
Yeah,
and
you
can
went.
quit judging. The girls didn't even care. My daddy took me to Hogwarts.
Like 2 years ago.
It didn't even matter that the kids were there. He even got me a Gryffindor robe.
Mm-hmm. She has a robe.
And I have a wand. I have 2 wands. Let's be
Okay,
honest.
maybe 6.
No, it's only 2.
We should make a parody with your robe and wands, and it should be Harry Potty.
Harry Potter. Making it rain.
Anywho, of course the guard is calling bullshit on the water being manifested from Dawn's mind, so he jokingly told Dawn to make it rain in the office of the warden, David Keenhold. Dawn accepted this challenge, concentrating as hard as he could. Dawn created a raindrop to float in the air all on its own. He floated it through the walls and doors and cells until he hit the warden, Dave Keenhold, right in the chest as he worked at his desk. The guard went into Warden Keenhold's office to see him sitting at his desk with a puzzled look on his face and water all over the front of his shirt.
Dave Keenhold was interviewed and stated,
Why are you laughing?
"The situation. Water just hit me.
Nowhere.
I got wet." Like, seriously, what would you say?
Oh, Lord.
So, what he said was,
Yeah, here it is. What he said.
"I was sitting at the desk and I was writing a report. I was all by myself in an administration area and nobody else was around. It was approximately 8 o'clock in the evening. At the time, I didn't feel anything. My shirt was drooping down. I didn't know what was going on then, and then the officer told me to look at my shirt. I looked down and my shirt was becoming saturated with water. The officer came in and was very frightened at the time, telling me what happened. I just didn't have any explanation for why it had happened."
So it doesn't sound like it was raining in the office in the same way that it had been raining in his cell or in the keeper's house or in the pizzeria, but there was an unexplainable amount of water on the front of Warden Keenhold's shirt, where there seemed to be no water around to have gotten on his shirt. This is where we're at.
I got wet. I wonder what that incident report write-up would look like. Guard told a magic inmate to put water on my shirt with his mind. I can't even say it. Guard told magic inmate.
Can't even say our own script. Sam, stop laughing and say it.
Okay, hold on. Okay, I got this. Guard told a magic inmate to put water on my shirt with his mind.
Good enough. Oh my goodness, the things we go through. I knew I was going to laugh. It wasn't long before havoc was being wreaked at the correctional facility as well. Soon, Dawn's roommate was completely freaking out.
That's fair.
He was upset. It was raining in their cell from every direction possible. Raindrops coming from everywhere and hovering in the air, moving slowly across the concrete room. Obviously, there was nowhere for him to go, and Dawn was acting weird. He wasn't so much in a trance, but he wouldn't answer any questions when spoken to, and he seemed as though he were doing it intentionally.
Which he was.
At this point, he was.
Dawn's roommate complained and begged enough that they removed Dawn from his cell and put him in a cell of his own. Several correctional officers saw this happening as well, and just like the keepers, they were completely enamored by it. The rain seemed to completely defy gravity, floating around in all different directions like something out of a movie. It crawled up the walls and across the ceiling, floating slowly through the air in all directions. It just didn't make any sense. One could surmise it was feckin' weird.
Keep in mind at this point, we have those 6 people from before he went to jail who saw 7, including the chief, who didn't really believe it. And now we've got all these correctional officers and Warden Keenhold who are also saying the exact same thing. Oh, and roommate. Roomy saw it too. Warden Keenhold was absolutely convinced that this was a demonic situation. There was no other explanation. They just couldn't ignore the blatant defiance of the laws of physics with this rain. Something was going on with Dawn Decker, and they couldn't fix it without a priest.
The warden had had enough. He called the chaplain, William Blackburn, and asked him to come immediately to the prison for an exorcism. Chaplain Blackburn had been told of the things that were going on and was really skeptical of it, thinking that Dawn Decker was just playing some sort of elaborate prank on everyone at the jail. He even continued to think it was a prank after he saw it for himself.
Chaplain Reverend Blackburn was interviewed as stating, so they brought this very meek, mild-mannered young man into the room, and he was asking for my help.
Decker could tell that the chaplain didn't believe him. The chaplain kept telling him that it was in his head and that everything would be okay. But Don knew better. It wasn't in his head, and he was becoming upset that this holy man didn't seem to be listening to anything that he said, and Don was being treated like he was a waste of time.
Reverend Blackburn stated, quote, all of a sudden, just like that, his demeanor changed, and a smell came into the room. Nurses and doctors and medical people will tell you that when you walk into a room where someone is dying, there's a smell. You can tell when you walk in the room. And I smelled a smell like that, multiplied 5 times at least. Evil. Foreboding. At that point, he raised his hand and rubbed his fingers together. Oh, hell no. What you doing, Don Decker?
Soon, Don seemed to go right into another trance. The rain seemed to pick up, and then Don, still not responsive, started rubbing 2 of his fingers together strangely. This sounds like something straight out of a Stephen King situation. Immediately, the room became stagnant with a foul-smelling odor.
I thought the same.
Dropping a little SBD.
I don't know what that means.
Silent but deadly. Brad. Anyway.
Yeah, shout out, Brad.
Immediately, the room became stagnant with a foul-smelling odor that seemed to come from nowhere. The rain was falling harder now, floating around the room at a faster pace and seeming to come from all directions.
The Reverend stated it was like the devil's rain, a mist. I was in the presence of evil. I opened up the Bible and started to read to him. The pages never got wet. So help me, it was a frightening thing. I think I was praying more for me than I was for him. It didn't take long. It was a brief period, and then the rain started to subside. He subsided, and I could feel a peace. He got tears in his eyes, and we hugged and prayed together. There is no way that a human being could do what he did in that room. He was possessed. There was no way that wasn't spiritual. And it wasn't of God.
So it doesn't really seem like an actual exorcism took place, but the chaplain did get out his Bible at this point and begin to read, performing an exorcism on the fly, kind of. If he wasn't a believer before, he sure was now. And if Don was some kind of illusionist, he sure was good at it.
After the exorcism was finished, Don seemed to immediately return to his normal self, relieved that the whole ordeal seemed to be over. He finished out his time in prison without incident and never experienced anything like this again.
Did David Blaine or Chris Angel ever make it rain inside?
I don't know.
Now, of course, something like this does not occur and slip through without some skepticism from critics. And we wouldn't do you any justice by not including critical theories into what happened to Don Decker.
One man named Bartholomew was one of the strongest skeptics here. He wrote an article called The Devil and Don Decker for Skeptic Magazine. What?
They literally just have a magazine where they sit around being skeptical of things?
Yeah, that's really a thing. Yes.
Skeptic Magazine Bartholomew, a Damon name.
Is it? I don't know. This is published by the Skeptics Society. So there's a whole society.
How am I not in this?
I don't know. It doesn't sound very fun. They just...
Wrong.
Yeah.
You're wrong.
You're wrong. Anyway, it's an interesting take on the paranormal because they basically get experts in the paranormal field to investigate various claims and use critical thinking to actively try to debunk the claim using reasonable judgment.
I'm skeptical of the fact that there are actually experts in the field of paranormal research.
I don't think there are.
Take that, Skeptic Magazine.
Bartholomew is quoted in the newspaper on PoconoRecord.com.
I was pronouncing that in my head as like popcorn accord.
Bartholomew is quoted in the newspaper on PoconoRecord.com as saying, I want to believe in the paranormal. I would describe myself as an open-minded researcher who follows where the facts lead. And in this instance, it's an indictment of TV docudramas. I do not think those involved are lying. I think this is a classic case of social delusion. If these events happened the way people claim they did over several days, it's beyond belief that no one took photos. And that seems to be his most prominent question. If this happened, why wasn't it recorded? Why was a photo never taken? You would think that everyone would want some sort of documentation for this incredible anomaly that they were so fortunate to witness, yet not even one of these many people involved thought to snap one picture.
Okay, my question is, what year did this happen?
We go into this. Yes.
Robert Bartholomew's attention was directed to the case of Don Decker by a colleague of his at the Botany Downs Secondary College in New Zealand. From what we understand, his coworker had heard of the case and had looked into it quite a bit and couldn't seem to find any reasonable explanation for it. So Bartholomew is from Whitehall, New York, and he is a teacher and medical sociologist. He co-authored the Encyclopedia of Extraordinary Social Behavior, and this is a pretty well-published work from what we understand, as his work can be seen in the British Journal of Psychiatry, the International Journal of Psychiatry, and New York Folklore magazine. Folklore.
He offers up his opinion in this incident as a third-party, impartial interpretation of the event, since he has no ties to Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, and he doesn't personally know any of the people involved. He believes that he can offer a genuinely objective, outside opinion from a professional who is looking at the facts and scientific explanations. He seems to really have good intentions.
As far as his explanation for the strange events, particularly the water, he claims that it's simple science. Due to the weather at the time, he feels that seeping rain could have easily come from a possible ice dam that may have formed on the roof of Kiefer's home. Of the Kiefer's home. Why do I keep calling him Kiefer? This happens when snow melts on the roof of a home as warm air enters the attic space of the house. After this, the outside dropping nighttime temperature freezes the top of the ice on the roof, trapping water underneath the ice on the roof. If the water and ice sits there for too long, it may leak through the roof. Supposedly, weather records for this area at the time show conditions that would be conducive to the possibility of ice damming.
So that explains the water part. Well, kind of. It's still...
It could.
I mean, not the water defying gravity, though.
Not floating diagonally and upward.
No.
Water just doesn't float.
So, I mean, I see where he's going with that. He says that, as far as all the witnesses go, he says that this is a case of social delusion. For those that aren't sure what that means, we have taken the liberty of looking up a proper definition, and I couldn't find one. So apparently, this is more just his term and not an official one. But I believe that he means that something with a reasonable explanation was probably going on. But one person misinterpreted this event as a paranormal event, and in making a big deal out of it, other people started to believe it too and back up the first person. People rarely want to be the odd man out, so they probably just kept it going with what the others in their group seemed to believe, perpetuating the story even against their better judgment. For the record, I do think this happens and is a real thing, but I don't think so in this case. I just don't believe that. There were a lot of people there that were officers, prison officials, the prison roommate, the Kiefers. I just feel like none of them had any connection, and at least one of them would have called bullshit on the whole thing.
Well, I feel like it's one thing to consider that if one person experienced something and then was explaining it to the other people, but they were all living it in real time.
They were seeing it
together.
Yeah.
It'd be like a group delusion.
Which I guess maybe happens. I don't know, but I don't know. I don't buy it. Especially because it wasn't just one event that a couple people, it was like they saw it a few times. Like those two cops that responded initially, they saw this 3 times.
And then there was other people that experienced at different times in completely unrelated incidents.
Yeah, I don't buy that. I'm gonna choose to believe in this situation. We have some where we choose not to believe. This one I do. His next question. Why did they not call a television station to report, or at the very least record, this unheard of event? He finds it unfortunate and unreliable that all we have from this incident are a handful of eyewitnesses.
I get his point a little bit. It sounds like these events weren't over and done with quickly. It seems as though they went on for hours at a time. And it's odd that nobody seemed to have thought to snap a quick picture of the guy floating around in the air before he got thrown around the room, or of the rain in the house while he sat there in a trance. I don't know. But I will say that cameras and video cameras are more readily available these days since they are right on the smartphone and everyone carries it around in their pocket. So it's easy to say that now because taking photos and videotaping everything is something that's super commonplace now compared to 1983. Granted, most houses did have a camera at the very least, so it wouldn't have been too much time to probably get one and snap a picture of the likely extremely significant moment. Levitation and gravity-defying rain is just not something you see every day, and I guess that is if they had film and all that good stuff, which is a possibility that they didn't. That's right, kids. Back in the day, before you could take pictures on a camera, You had to take the time to load the film into the camera. There were no such thing as digital cameras or smartphones. But if you're living in that moment and all this stuff is happening, you would be consumed by it, overwhelmed, and you might not think to go grab the camera like you would today because you literally just pull it out of your pocket. I don't know.
I totally agree. And we see situations like that today where we hear, I should have got a picture.
Yeah.
You know, you're so wrapped up in what you're seeing that you don't always do that.
Mm-hmm.
Some people do get lucky and get sweet UFO photos. Look at Bigfoot.
But you had that a lot. Like when we were investigating the Beast of Bray Road thing, people would always say, well, we brought all of our cameras and all this stuff to try to get a picture. But when we saw it, we panicked and didn't know what to do.
We freaked out.
And we left. And we didn't take a picture.
Yeah, so that's kind of the human condition. We do that.
If you're afeared, you're going to be worried about your survival, not
Right.
of getting a picture.
Well, not only that, but they were also worried about Don. He kept getting picked up and thrown across the room.
And
So, I mean, yeah, and scratched. So, I think they were...
was Matrix water.
Yeah, for God's sakes, there was Matrix water. For the love of God.
For the love of God, man.
For the love of Pete.
For the love of Keanu. There was Matrix water.
They went too far. Okay, so anyway, it was caused by stress. It's possible that his feelings during that time were so strong and going in so many different directions that he manifested the rain with his mind alone. But even that doesn't explain the reflection of the old man that he saw in the window, the levitation and being thrown across the room, being burned by the cross, and the scratch marks that were bleeding on his body. I don't know how he could have faked it, but if he did, he was really good at it. No doubt that Don Decker was dealing with a lot. His incredibly abusive grandfather had passed. Surely there was tons of built-up anger toward this man that he was working through at the time. Not only that, but he was a prison inmate at the time trying to serve out a sentence. And on top of that, his family stood at the funeral speaking kind words about this horrific man, but didn't want to see him and wouldn't have him stay with them. I'm honestly sure that this was a lot, and that his feelings were weighing very heavily on him at the time. But chalking a whole incident like this up to something as simple as stress, I don't know about that. That seems more outlandish than just saying it had to be a demon.
While searching for information about Don Decker, a news segment was found from Channel 16 WNEP in Monroe County, Pennsylvania. In the news segment, they state that he had been charged with arson for setting fire to a Dana's restaurant in the Pocono Mountains on October 12th of 2011.
So he got in trouble again.
He had said that the restaurant owner hired him to set fire to the restaurant. That is all that was said of the incident in this particular news segment, so we decided to delve a little deeper into that and found several other articles relating to the incident. Another article by Tracy Jordan from a local paper called The Morning Call stated that the restaurant owner was indeed charged with arson as well for hiring Decker to burn down the restaurant and tavern. Both men were also charged with mail fraud, criminal conspiracy, and the use of fire to commit a federal felony.
Apparently the restaurant owner did hire Don to set the fire and then agreed to pay him $25,000 from the insurance money for doing so.
It's hard to turn down.
Right?
I would never do that.
No. We're not sure if Don is still doing time in jail for this or not. Last I could find, he had not encountered any more incidents like this since he was last in jail praying with the chaplain.
So did he start the fire? We didn't start the fire. Did he start it with matches or did he start it with his mind?
Well,
Is pyrokinesis a thing for him?
I don't know. I think he started it with matches, but then I was like, wouldn't you be curious and see if you could put it out with your mind?
Well, there's so many things that you could try to do with your mind. If you can make it rain, surely you can make other things.
I don't know if he's ever tried to. I would. Every day I would.
Staring at goats. I have pyrokinesis.
You don't.
That's it for this week's episode of Bigfoot for Breakfast. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your week to listen to us for a little while, and we really hope that you'll be back next week to see what we've got for you then. We've got a few good ones coming up in the lineup. Pretty excited. Always good stuff, if I don't say so myself.
I was going to say, braggart.
Don't mean to toot, but toot.
Toot proud.
Anyway, don't forget to push the subscribe button on your podcast app, and if you get a few minutes, please do leave us a rating and a review. This really helps us out a ton, and we really appreciate hearing from you guys. If you have any show suggestions, email us at bigfootforbreakfast@outlook.com. Send us a message on the good old Facebook or Instagram, and we'll get right back to you. Again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Well, you'll hear us next week.
Yeah, you'll hear us. Also, before we go, we have a listener voicemail. This never happens to us. We're going to play that now, and then we're out. Bye.
Send in the clowns.
Hi, it's Trusty the Clown. Just kidding. It's your mother. I just thought I'd give you a call because I feel like I kind of got a bum rap on your last Island episode. I really am hurt by the fact that you called me an asshole and said that you grew up in a torture house because I don't feel like it was that bad. Yes, I did enjoy it quite a bit, but I just feel like you were a little harsh. Anyway, I am a big fan, and I love you. Thank you. Goodbye.